Ooh.
You're dead, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead and out of this world.
Bro, I'm straight up not having a good time.
Whenever a group of young men gathers, there will always be a certain level of stupidity. Add some competition, pride and prestige to that mix, and the retard levels will be off the shafts. Point is that it is hard to understand what people really think about the difficulty in the Dark Souls games. I can certainly admit to getting butthurt in all the different From Software games that I have played. But in the last two games in particular, I think that they have gone off in a bad direction when it comes to their bosses. And now, just after completing Elden Ring,
Let's go, buddy.
and the horrible slog it was to beat the long sequence of bosses at the end of the game, I want to put those feelings into a video before I forget them. I like the Dark Souls games. They are part of the few new games that I feel genuinely excited for. What I like though is the sense of adventure. My best memories are from exploring these interesting areas with a real feeling of danger and wonder. Elden Ring succeeded with this as well. Sure, the copy-paste nonsense didn't help, but the game still had plenty to offer. Exploring the underground cavern with these flesh-eating giant ants was just great, for instance. One reason the exploration works is because of the game's difficulty. Difficulty creates tension. It sucked to explore areas when I was overleveled in Elden Ring. And there would be no tension if I could quick save and quick load every minute. Point is that there is a time and place for difficulty, but for the exploration, I think From Software has found a nice balance. The bosses have never been my favorite part of the Dark Souls games, but I still have plenty of good memories. Going up against the boss for the first time is exciting, and I have plenty of memories of just barely killing a boss by doing some last chance Hail Mary attack. Sadly, I feel that From Software are more and more focusing on the bosses being difficult and hard to first try. I would go into some details, but the core here is that fighting a new boss is exciting and fits perfectly into the feeling of adventure that I am looking for. However, having to fight the same boss over and over again to learn every detail of his moveset is not exciting. It is a chore. And the word that I would use to describe it when talking with my friends is autistic. The combat system of Dark Souls games have always been fairly simple. You can avoid attacks by being out of their hitbox. Blocking them, or dodging in the right time so that the attack occurs during your iframes. And then you can strike away at your enemies. There are no wacky combos or anything like that, and the core of most boss fights is to figure out: how do I avoid the different attacks? When do I have the chance to hit back? And when do I have the chance to heal? And etc. and etc. Now 7 games later, players are starting to get quite good at this gameplay, but From Software still wants to make these bosses hard, because that is important for some reason. So how do they do that? Well, in several different ways. The first way is simple: make it counterintuitive to avoid taking damage. Timing is important to be able to avoid damage, and by slowing down and speeding up animations, you can make sure that the player will not be able to get it right for the first time. I can't stress enough how silly this is, with all the bosses stopping in midair trying to trick you to dodge too early. Another method is by adding constant shockwave effects and moving shockwave effects, which are impossible to predict. Point is that with a moveset like this, the player needs to fight against their own intuition and instead learn the boss moveset by heart. And of course, this takes a lot of trial and error. The second way to make things difficult is related to the first way, and it is simply to make the fight long and the boss attacks punishing. The longer the fight, and the harder the boss hits, the more you need to perfectly learn the moveset. Same can be achieved by simply making the boss hyper-aggressive to make sure that you don't have a safe possibility to heal. The third way to make a boss difficult is simply to make sure that you don't get a lot of uninterrupted practice. At the end of the day, the combat system is simple, and it is just a matter of learning the timing and behavior of the different movesets. This is a trial and error process, and even the worst player will learn the moveset eventually. However, by adding a long run-up or an unrelated first phase of the boss, you can make it so that the player will have to do something else for 5 minutes. It is just a simple way to make sure that it takes longer time to learn the moveset, which is causing the player problem. The fourth way is of course to just make a gank boss, and fuck those in particular. All of these ways works together to make some of the bosses in these games a fucking chore. I spent hours on some of these bosses, and that is not counting the hours spent farming to improve my odds. There have always been these types of bosses, but previously they have often been optional bosses or DLC bosses, which I usually skip out on. Now in Elden Ring, you have a long sequence of these at the end of the game, and it was just awful. I discussed this with a friend, and one phrase that was said was that this is a young man's game, and I think there is some truth to that. Bashing your head against the wall just to kill a boss so that you can say that you beat the game is a frustrating chore that might make sense to a young man that have nothing but time and pride. But for a man fast approaching 30, it makes a lot less sense. I work hard at my job, and I don't want to come home to that shit. I had the balls to drop Sekiro when it became clear what kind of shit that game pulled, and I should probably have done the same to Elden Ring. But I am foolish enough to want to beat games when I have put a lot of time into them. Perhaps you are a weirdo and you like these bosses, and then good for you. But maybe, just maybe, you feel like me, and then it would be nice if we could be a bit more vocal on the topic.